Further afield, President Donald Trump has reiterated his warning that BRICS nations could face tariffs from the United States if they set up their own currency. Trump told reporters in the Oval Office yesterday that the idea of undermining the dollar is dead now. The BRICS nations, comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, as well as South Africa and others, have had discussions about setting up their own currency.
The BRICS nations, I think that's breaking up very rapidly. We said that if they're going to go and do anything to undermine the dollar, that includes China. I don't even know that they're a member of BRICS, but they had a few nations get together to try and play cute. And I said, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every one of those nations. And at the mere thought of saying that, I think that's all broken up. That idea has no longer sailed. Now, that would be a terrible thing for our country. It would be bad for the world. They wanted to undermine the dollar. 6 nations got together. They wanted to undermine the dollar. That didn't work out too well. Not going to happen.
Let's get reaction now. For more on Donald Trump's U.S. foreign policy and the U.S.-South Africa relationship, I'm joined now by international relations expert, Professor Oscar Van Heerden. Prof, good to have you on the program this evening. South Africa is considering a bilateral trade agreement as an alternative to AGOA. Let's speak about this. What are the potential advantages and challenges of this approach?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Prof, I hope you can hear me clearly right now. I'm saying, considering the bilateral trade agreement, especially that's being proposed and as alternative to AGOA, what are the potential advantages and challenges of this approach?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that the South African government is obviously trying to come with creative ideas to try and salvage this preferential trade agreement, AGOA, which really speaks to a much larger trade agreement between the two countries, and in that way try and find each other. I'm not sure if it's going to work. Obviously, any country, including South Africa, want to have good relations with the largest economy in the world. And I think that the Ramaphosa administration is trying to find creative and interesting ways to try and circumvent this current diplomatic spat.
But in your view, how realistic is it for South Africa to negotiate, call it favorable terms with the U.S., especially given this current geopolitical climate?
Look, we've got a history of being able to negotiate very well. You know, if you look at the TDCA agreement that we have with the European Union, a very small economy like South Africa was able to successfully negotiate good terms with the European Union. We've done the same with other trade agreements. So we certainly have the skill set. We have the resources and human capacity to try and negotiate a good deal with the United States. But the big question is, will the United States be receptive to actually having such a trade agreement, given the tensions that exist now?
But our President Cyril Ramaphosa is known as a great negotiator, while Donald Trump is known as a deal maker here. Let's speak about this. How might changes to trade agreements with the U.S. especially impact, especially key sectors in South Africa, such as agriculture and the automotive industry?
Look, I mean, it will be disastrous if AGOA gets cancelled. It's not renewed. I think it's a foregone conclusion, by the way. It's going to happen. And so those sectors need to prepare themselves for the shock. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the kinds of demands that the Trump administration has placed on South Africa, South Africa is simply not in a position to meet those demands. You know, I hear the business sector encouraging the South African government to have good relations with the U.S., but the truth of the matter is that if the Ramaphosa administration capitulate under these terms, for example, having to drop the case against Israel at the ICJ, having to not have good relations with Iran, Russia, and China, etc. These are all principled issues that if we do so, if we do capitulate, it means that we will forever be the lapdog of the United States, not only apparently on the foreign policy front, because as you know, Trump is also taking issue with some of our domestic policies, such as the expropriation without compensation law. It simply means that we will forever have to make a phone call to Washington, D.C. to check whether we can or cannot do certain things, both domestically and internationally. And there's no country that will agree to such terms.
But Prof, could South Africa's diplomatic positions, especially on internal or rather international issues, such as its stance on the Israel-Palestine conflict, but also the relations with China and Russia, how might this influence the outcome of these trade negotiations between Pretoria and Washington?
It's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. Trump has put us into a very difficult pickle, to say the least. He's playing hard politics. He's, as you say, a businessman, a transactional leader, and he wants the best deal for the United States. And that best deal, according to him, as I said, is all the things that I've just mentioned. And I don't think that South Africa is going to be able to negotiate or meet them halfway, because that would simply be disastrous for the sovereignty of the Republic of South Africa. So it's a hard business. It's going to be a tough journey going forward, but I can almost assure you, given the hard stance that the Trump administration is taking, President Trump is not going to relent. And so we are going to have to face the consequences of having a serious difficulty with the United States in the foreseeable future.
Right. Prof, before we let you go, I want us to explore this aspect a bit further. To what extent do you think South Africa's growing ties, especially with China, and its position on the Ukraine conflict, how are these going to influence the relationship with the U.S.?
Look, let me talk on the first one, our relationship with China. The European Union, Latin America, and North America, and including the United States of America, their biggest trading partner, as we speak, is China. And so to try and demand something different from South Africa is nonsensical. China is our biggest trading partner, as they are with many, many countries, including the United States. So on that one, nothing's going to happen. We are going to forge ahead with the relationship and the trade arrangement with China. On the second one with Ukraine, I think that the Ramaphosa administration will have to think very hard and deep about it. And perhaps, even though they want to be on the right side of history, they need to perhaps be clear that if they are supportive of international law, if they are supportive of the rules-based international order, then perhaps they should agree that what Russia is doing, although some might understand it because it poses a threat on their borders, it probably must be condemned.
More broadly, how does the potential for a bilateral trade agreement align with South Africa's broader foreign policy objectives?
Look, we want good relations and trade relations with all countries, especially the largest economy in the world. I mean, as you've mentioned in your insert, the automobile sector, the agriculture sector, fruit, veg, the wine industry, all of them, among others, of course, they all benefit from the AGOA preferential trade agreement. We want to take that further. We want to enhance those sectors and industries, but it's not going to be possible at the expense of foreign policy and domestic policy. It's just not going to happen.
But it also then begs the question, Prof, that if AGOA is revoked, what strategic steps should South Africa then take to mitigate economic impacts, but also to strengthen its international trade position?
Well, for starters, they would have to meet. I think the first step is to meet with those industries and to begin to prepare them for the eventuality that it might not get renewed. So they need to be able to take those economic shocks. They'll recover, of course, over a period, but that's the first step. The second step is to then go out and try and find alternative markets for the very industries that is being negatively impacted. Look at India, look at China, look at Brazil and elsewhere, the rest of the continent of Africa. But look at alternative markets to try and fill that gap. It's not impossible, but it's going to be a difficult journey.
And as we conclude, what role do you see for other international partners or trade blocs in really supporting South Africa's economic resilience amid this shifting global alliances that we are seeing?
I think we're already seeing goodwill from various parts of the world. They understand the difficult situation that we are in with the Trump administration. He's threatened Canada and Mexico, as you know. He's threatened China. He's even threatened his allies in Europe. So we've seen that the European Union came out very strongly in support of South Africa, saying that not only do they support the presidency of the G20, but also they are supporting South Africa in terms of going forward. And it was a clear message that they were sending to President Trump to say, we don't agree with you about the misinformation. We support South Africa. I think China did the very same immediately when the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said he's not coming to the G20 ministers meeting. China came out and said, we will be there. We are supporting South Africa. So I think there is goodwill in the world to try and, in a way, shield South Africa for the impending shocks that's coming from the United States.
Professor Oscar Van Heerden, thank you so much for your time, helping us unpack, of course, these frosty relations between Pretoria and South Africa, but also looking at the evolving landscape of trade relations between these two nations.